Actually, just give me 1 second. Sorry. Are you there, Jordan? Hello, this is Chris Cooper, and a big welcome to the Business Elevation Show. It's great to be back with you again for yet another week, and this is episode 641. You listen to the Business Elevation Show. We're one of the longest running business shows in the world now, and what I love to do is to bring fascinating guests to you with real expertise and wisdom. Often they've got a lot of expertise in the business world, but also really care about contributing to good in the world and improving the world, because we believe that good matters. And today, when we're feeling increasingly polarized and we're seeing so many challenges geopolitically and economically around the world, it's important, I think, that we start to look at what is really truly important for humanity. So today we're going to talk to Bennett Borden. Before we do that, I'd like to say thank you to Aaron Hurst, who was on the last live show that we did a couple of weeks ago, and it was a fascinating interview with Aaron. One of the many things Aaron has achieved is he has established the US Chamber of Connection, and what they are doing is really looking at what is it in society that is causing this polarization and split, and what do people really need to feel connected with each other so they feel happy and fulfilled. And they've done a big piece of work in Seattle. They've been connecting people who have an impact on the city when it comes to connection, and they're working together to improve the lives of people in Seattle and now 7 other cities in the US. So that's lovely to hear people doing very positive work to bring communities and people together in these times. So something that is really important right now in the world is a big topic is AI. And AI can engender and bring up, for those of us who are aware of it, a lot of fear and trepidation, but also it can contribute significantly to improving the world's challenges. So I'm really interested in AI and how do we utilize it to improve our challenges, and how do we also talk about it and impact the world to actually do it in a very appropriate and enlightened way. Now, my guest today, Bennett, was involved on Monday with me within, I lead a community called the Elevation Collective. So my guests who have been on this show, I invite them into conversation, and that's led to a community where those of us who really care of improving the world come together. And Bennett was a guest on Monday with a fabulous audience, and he talked to us about AI. And our community was really enraptured in that conversation. We love the concept of Iron Man, not Terminator, which is something that Bennett talks about. And we're going to talk today about using AI to amplify human potential. I would say Monday with Bennett and another guest that we had who joined as well, that you're going to meet in a few weeks. So you're going to meet Jay, who is I'm just looking at Jay Summit, who is also at the leading edge, a cutting edge of AI in the world. You're going to meet him in a few weeks' time as well. I think this is one of the most important topics for humanity right now. I would suggest if you've got a piece of paper, you might want to just highlight 2 or 3 nuggets from today that you can take away and you can work with and action. Because we need to take responsibility for what's about to happen. So to give you a little bit of background, as we've said, artificial intelligence is transforming our world. It's doing so at an extraordinary pace. We're creating both exciting opportunities to solve significant challenges like cures for ailments, But also we need to do it in a way that improves human potential rather than diminishes it. In this very competitive world, it's very easy for AI to be used for competitive advantage and money generation. In this conversation, I'm going to introduce you to Bennett Borden. He's the founder and CEO of Clarion AI Partners. And he's globally recognized as an expert on the legal, ethical, and technological and business implications of artificial intelligence. He's a former partner and chief data scientist at DLA Piper, and he sees AI as the most transformative technology since electricity. We'll talk about Iron Man, not Terminator philosophy soon, but I know AI so Bennett feels actually, if we really grasp hold of this together in an appropriate way, then AI could solve many of the problems that we have that we're facing around the world. Now, within his work, in his company Clarion Partners AI, he's doing lots and lots of work with significant organisations, helping them explore the future of how they utilise AI in their businesses. And he loves to talk about the kind of work, education, ethics, and regulation of AI. But he loves to work with leaders to really help them to serve humanity and use AI for good. So we're going to talk about all of this today. I'd like to welcome my guest today. I'd like to welcome Bennett Borden.
Thank you so much, Chris. It's an absolute delight to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you here for the conversation today. But before we get started, Bennett, I always like to find out a little bit about the background of our guests, and I've been researching a little bit of your fascinating, incredible background. I just wonder if you could maybe tell us a little bit about what life was like growing up for you. I know you're in Salt Lake City area, aren't you, Utah, in the United
Now I am,
States?
yes.
Yeah. Now, tell us a bit about where it all started for you, and maybe what you learned that maybe led you towards what you're doing today.
Well, interestingly, I grew up in a very small town in eastern Tennessee, which is in the southern part of the United States, um, and was blessed with parents who were intellectuals, and so I'm an avid book reader, very much into history and in philosophy. Like I've always been very curious about why do societies set themselves up the way that they do. Um, I actually carried that into my education. I When I went to university, which I finished in England, I put together kind of my own degree on how do societies form themselves, so turning points in history. So over the 7,000 years of recorded history, why do some societies set themselves up in one way and other societies in another, and what are the forces that cause that to happen? How do established societies react to changes like ecological or economic pressures, that decide to go to war or not, have a revolution or not, um, and especially focusing on the impact of technology. So everything from saddles and arrows and gunpowder, all the way up through the second industrial revolution, and now today, which is I think is the most unique technological revolution that the world has ever experienced. And so um, I studied, history, philosophy, theology, anthropology, sociology, all the ologies, basically. Um, and it was during that time where I was approached by these. I came out of class one day, and there were these two guys in dark suits, and they said, "We're recruiting for a federal agency. Would you like were to speak with us?" And I'm like, "That, yeah, great," because all of my things I'm studying, there's not a clear path to monetization, right? And so it turned out that they were from the CIA, which I didn't believe at first, but we got past that. Um, and this was in the early 90s, so 1992, and they said, "We are establishing kind of a new data analytics shop within the larger Directorate of Intelligence. And we'd like to hire you to work in this data analytics shop. And I'm like, I'm not sure you have the right guy. I don't really under don't really do data. Um, I'm not particularly good at math. I hate statistics. I failed calculus, and they said, "Yeah, we know all that. What we want you for is to help understand human behavior based on the digital trail that they leave behind." So if you'll recall the early 90s, what was happening technologically was the World Wide Web and email was
Mm.
just coming out of academia to the public. Cell phones were just coming on the market. And so there was this new kind of data that we were creating that was very personalized. And so as people went through their lives becoming, just being people, they were starting to give off this digital contrail. And the agency rightfully saw that that contrail would become richer and more diverse, and as it obviously has. And so I worked at the agency for 8 years, using that digital contrail to look for movements in societies. Kind of what were the traits of people or groups of people? Could we identify and understand the behavior of these groups? Could we predict their behavior? And of course, then could we influence their behavior? Now, this is something that every social media company, every app, every cookie on your, everything, everybody does this today, in a way that is alarmingly accurate and scary. But at the time, it was really cool, cutting edge science. But I'd always wanted to go to law school. And so after my stint at the agency, I went on to Georgetown Law, and then went on to New York University for a graduate degree in data analytics.
So just there's just a little gap that I just want to understand for a moment. So there you are studying unusually all the ologies, a very disparate number of subjects, and then you tell us that some men in dark suits came to see you. So there was something there's something that you did that during that time period that attracted attention. What was that?
You know, you never know really know at the agency. They keep a really good eye on a lot of universities, on people that they put their eye on, to potentially be useful. But I think that what drove our their interest, but also my interest, is that I've always seen data as a reflection of human conduct. And I've always been very curious about how do human beings go about being human beings? How do we develop what beliefs we have? How do we express them? Who gets involved in what? How does that affect the overall society and the overall governance of that society? And so it's a very interesting perspective that I've taken into the practice of law, but especially with artificial intelligence, that there's almost, I feel like this sacred duty almost around this precious data that we have, because it is a reflection of humanity. We are literally the most documented members of our species since our species has been around. And all of this data is not just some random independent thing. It is a thing associated with humans and choices and the things that they do. And so I've always had this kind of unique perspective that data links to people, and that there is a responsibility, a moral responsibility that we have to use that data, in a way that is ennobling and furthering and flourishing, as opposed to extortative.
Yeah. So you find yourself working with AI and with companies. Now you've formed Clarion AI Partners. Tell us a little bit about the work that you do with AI to help your clients. What are you doing with it?
You know, my whole career has been around kind of the intersection of technology, data, and the law. And so early on, it was kind of the era of big data and algorithms, what they call classical AI now. Um, so the algorithms that we all talk about that run on our lives, which they actually do. So most of my practice originally was around how do you get insight out of massive quantities of data?
Yes.
And so that led everything from deriving evidence out of massive quantities of email and documents and things for business and business litigation or internal investigations, vetting of C-suite candidates or political appointees. But then really my work focused entirely on automated decision-making systems. So these algorithms. So, of course, we all know that every time you apply for a credit card or a mortgage or a loan or a job, everything you see on your social media feed, every ad that gets fed up to you, your streaming services recommendations, or when you check out from your favorite online shopping platform and they say, "Hey, you might like this too." All of those are run by these algorithms. And so my job was to help companies design these algorithms so that one, they were accurate, right? You want to
Mm.
reach the people that you're trying to reach for whatever your commercial purpose is. But then that they were also safe and effective and legally compliant. And so everything from across many, many different industries, the more highly regulated ones like financial services, insurance, labor employment, healthcare, but manufacturing, defense, retail. One thing that's been very interesting about my life as a lawyer is that every company uses data and every company wants insight out of that data. And so I've been very fortunate to have a very wide view of how data is used commercially and with nonprofit entities throughout my career. I have always spent my career kind of in what they call big law here in the United States. So one of the top 10 firms. I started out at Gibson, Dunn and Crutcher, and as you said, I ended up at DLA Piper. And interestingly, I was way back in 2015, I was the first chief data scientist at a law firm. And I always found that very puzzling because lawyers are fundamentally dealers in information, right? And we take in information about a client situation, we compare it to the law, and then we add our legal acumen to it, and we deliver an information-based product, whether that is an argument in court, a deposition outline, an employment contract, whatever it is, right? And so you would think that more focus on how we go about driving information and enriching it with acumen and then delivering that product would be more um, professionalized or more purposeful. But so the idea of being a first chief data scientist was something that I was very proud of. And then I have stayed in that position in big law up until the point that I decided to create my own AI law firm.
So let's talk about AI. So how would you define AI?
It's one of the biggest questions that nobody can agree on, but it's really quite simple to me, is that it is these non-human models and computer processes that whose behavior appears to be similar to a human's behavior or intellect. So we're seeing it through all the frontier models, all the many uses that we're seeing in SaaS-based products where they're bolting on artificial intelligence. And so it is sweeping the world. Of course, there's
Mm.
not really any part of our lives that are not going to be affected by this. But to me, it is um, when a particular computerized piece of content is as good as or better than a human's intelligence.
And is it able to think for itself?
That is a very big question. And so, the first thing we have to think about is, what does think mean?
Mm.
And so, think on a very basic level is, can it process information? Can it deduce one fact from another? Things like that. Of course, it does. If you think more like on Socrates and Plato's level, that's where the big debate lies.
Yeah.
But for all intents and purposes, for us, it absolutely thinks.
Mm.
When you're using AI for as simple as note taking for a meeting, and it takes that transcript and it summarizes and pulls out the key nuggets and the follow ups, and that is an absolutely thinking. And more than that, it's an analyzing process, which is incredibly useful, right? But that's where it also starts to get a little bit scary.
Yeah. Yeah. 'Cause I mean, it also lots of ethical issues as well, isn't there?
Indeed.
Someone suggested the other day I should use a particular AI tool to access all of my email content and then pull out. Then it can pull out for me, lovely things people have said about me we can use for testimonial. And you're saying, oh, hang on a minute, that information in there's a lot of confidential information between me and people.
Yes.
I would feel right about that, but actually, that sort of behaviour has an impact. Is happening today, and I just wonder. We should maybe just talk about well, you've said this moment is as important as the and transformative of electricity. Just chat about that for a moment.
Indeed. Like, if this truly is the most transformative and disruptive technology that arguably the world has ever seen, um, electricity is the closest comparison that I often use, more than the printing press, more than computers, more than the internet, because its effect across society is so immense. There literally is not a part of our lives that it's not going to affect, and we are just at the barely beginning stage of this. And this has, I'm a huge AI optimist, because it has the ability and is even now transforming at things like education and healthcare, how we deliver products and services, how that companies can capture the secret sauce that makes them unique and amplifies them. But it is so impactful and is progressing so quickly that this is where you get all the concerns about control and alignment. So the theory of alignment is, does an AI system's goals and objectives align with humanity's, which is a scary concept to even contemplate. But like you had asked earlier, what I do with companies, and it really is helping them decide how to decide to use AI.
Hmm.
And this is where this concept of Iron Man versus the Terminator
Hmm.
comes in, which is one of my favorite analogies, that we can talk about a little bit. But the potential of, you've seen all of these new discoveries with pharmaceuticals or medical treatments, what it's doing in transforming education. For the first time ever, the possibility of having the world's best education for every child on the planet is within reach
Yeah.
with these kinds of models, because ultimately what these frontier models are the world's largest compendium of human knowledge that have ever been assembled.
Yeah. I was my youngest son. who's just doing his exams, his GCSEs, they're called over here at the moment. And I said to him, "You are using AI, aren't you? You do work with AI because I think it's important that everybody gets to understand that." I said, "Dad, I've used AI probably 10 times a day, and just to let you know, when I do my exam papers that I've been doing in preparation for my exams, I use AI to mark them, and I ask AI to do it stringently." Uh,
Precisely.
so
This is the beauty of it, right? Is that
yeah,
it can take on any of these roles. And one of the biggest worries is that AI is going to replace critical thinking and replace education. When you can look up an answer, why I need to be educated. Well, that's crazy. Education has never been about just relaying facts. It's
yeah,
been about relaying the ability to critically think and to judge and to balance. Now that's going to require a tremendous reformation of how we do education throughout the world. But used correctly, it can literally put a personalized tutor in the hands of every child on the planet.
yeah. Because I actually wonder if, in some ways, maybe my critical thinking is getting better by working in harmony with AI. Bouncing around,
Precisely.
thinking about ideas. It's getting me thinking about things on a, how do I rewire myself at the moment to be able to adjust to this new world. And I think there's a lot of learning that's going on right now, and I think AI can help with that. So it'll be interesting to know where that goes. We're going to go to commercial break now. After the break, we'll talk obviously a lot more about this and some of the ethical dilemmas. I'd love to also hear from Bennett any when it comes to personally as a business person and a leader. What are the areas of AI that we should really look into at the moment, and if it was any practical suggestions. I use ChatGPT all the time, for example. Some people are using Claude. I use something called Cast Magic for my radio shows. There are different tools out there. So I'm going to ask Bennett a little bit about that after the break too. So do, as I say, take that piece of paper. Do have a reflection in the second half. I'm sure there'll be lots of golden nuggets for you to take away. And we're back again in just a couple of minutes. Hi, this is Chris Cooper. I'm with Bennett Borden, and we're talking about AI. And in the title of today's episode, it was Iron Man, not Terminator, using AI to amplify human potential. So I love this concept of Iron Man and not Terminator. Do you want to share? This came from you when we spoke. Do you want to share what this means to you and why it's so important?
Thanks, Chris. It's one of my favorite analogies that I use with leaders of companies all the time, right? Because the truth of the matter is that uh, when people think about like AI is going to take over my job, that's not typically how it works. You're not going to just unplug a human and plug in a bot, and it's going to do all the things that that human did. That's not really how to optimize your operations within a company. It's much more like Iron Man, right? Where you've got Tony Stark, really smart guy, right? And he could do a lot of physical things. He can jump and he can, whatever. But when you enable surround him with this enabling technology, his Iron Man suit and his Jarvis AI, all of a sudden he's a superhero.
Mm.
Everything that he does, everything that he can envision is augmented and extended. And so this is the kind of philosophy that we use when we work with companies, because every company does stuff, whatever that stuff is, right? And they do it in a series of steps. And some of those steps are better done by AI and some are better done by humans. Like when I was at DLA Piper, it was when Gen AI came out. And so represented the early AI companies, and I had represented the other tech companies for years. And it was interesting because the head of the firm asked me, do some analysis and see what you would think about how generative AI is going to affect the practice of law. And so we did this tremendous analysis. So luckily we had this wonderful data set, right? Lawyers write down what we do every tenth of an hour. Um, and so we had a massive number of years of thousands of attorneys' time entries and saying and describing what they did. And to make a very long story short, it turns out that every lawyer, no matter what their practice area is, does 6 or 7 things over and over again. And very conservatively, about 80% of what they do today is better done by AI.
Mm.
Well, that's an existential threat to how we practice law today. And so, because the billable hour model is just so entrenched in especially kind of the big law culture, everybody, it's how your performance is rated, it's how everybody's scored, it's like the thing. But the amount of time somebody spends on something is not necessarily the best proxy anymore for the value that that thing can bring, especially if you use AI to pull together past understanding and work product and acumen and build those into an agent, then I'm putting the same value into an expert system. Um, and the product that comes out of it is just as valuable as if I or more valuable than if I had done it from the start again. But efficiency has never been the friend of lawyers, because if something takes less time, then you get paid less for it. So I kind of came to 2 realizations at the same time. One was I really didn't want to spend the last 10 years of my career trying to turn the Titanic, right? Like try to, because on the flip side of that argument is that a law firm that is entirely based upon AI, where we do capture, like in my firm, all of our lawyers are lawyer, data scientists, or computer scientists or something, right? We've got more than 120 years worth of combined legal experience. And we've spent literally the last 2 years taking that experience and work product, the acumen that's in our heads, and built it into a multi-agent system, our own Jarvis that we call Claire or Clarion. They call it the Bennett bot, which really irritates me, but it's Claire. But so now we've taken it's a perfect example of how AI works best for every company is when there are tasks that are data centric, that are highly repetitive, you do them over and over again, and you're applying the same judgments to them. That is the best optimization function for AI and especially agents or little knowledge bots. And so what we do is help companies figure out what their workflows are, what steps are in those workflows, and which of those steps are better done by AI and which are essentially human. Because even in the case of lawyers, the 20% that's left is utterly, absolutely, essentially human.
Yes.
And that's going to vary depending upon your company and your industry and things like that. But it's getting that mix correctly. And then how you build that agent, that knowledge bot and how you control its behavior can ensure literally. So what I say that's very provocative, that you should see the look on CEOs' faces when I say you can control AI perfectly. They're like, I read all the headlines. I've seen all the things that go terribly wrong with AI. And like, well, that's because they didn't build it right. But you can control AI perfectly and be able to prove that to anybody who asks, whether it's a court, a regulator, or the court of public opinion. And so that's this idea of Iron Man. You take your people that you have spent years training and their experience, and sometimes and the data, sometimes you got decades or even centuries worth of data in your company where prior acumen and experience and decisions have been made. And you can identify that data, put it into what they call a retrieval augmented generation database, basically a folder, and point a model at it and say, get all your answers from here. And that is where you take the secret sauce, the distinguishing feature of what makes your company different. And you can apply AI precisely at those points to utterly magnify what you do.
Hmm. And I think that's the interesting thing, isn't it? Use that utterly magnify what you do. Is that we can spend a lot of time on those. We have done a people resource have on the more administrative work, when actually the more strategic work could change the world. We sometimes
Exactly.
we might spend a lot of time on the mind news shy. Is it Elon Musk who sort of believes, is it 20% of the workforce do 80% of the work?
And
Um,
it's true, right? Like these what I tell companies all the time is that, look, these off the shelf models, so whether it's OpenAI embedded into the Microsoft, or sorry, Copilot embedded into the Microsoft system, or OpenAI or Claude or Gemini, or pick your model, right? Let that loose in your company and you're going to get efficiency gains. You just will. 20%, 30%. It makes everybody's job faster, easier, more consistent if you use it right and have the right policies and quality control checks and things like that. That's great. But the problem is that it's available to everybody. And so you get this first mover advantage by leaning into it first, but that quickly disappears. And all of a sudden, everybody has the same tools. And when everybody's special, nobody's special. And doing that is just table stakes. If you're not doing that, then you're already falling behind.
yeah.
But the really transformative part is when you capture your acumen and build agents around that acumen. A lot of companies just think I'll just put all of pour my data into one big pool and point a model at it, and all of a sudden I'll get all this great stuff out. Yes, kind of. But if you concentrate the attention of a bot or an agent onto a very specific part of your workflows, that is where you start to see truly um, just magnificent changes and augmentation. And what I tell companies a lot is there's two things. One is transforming your company with AI is only a 20% technological problem. It's an 80% psychological and sociological problem, right? Because people in your company have all kinds of feelings about AI. Some of them are terrified that it's going to replace their jobs, or they're just training AI to take over. Some of them are like raring to go, right? But everybody wants to be a super suit, right? Right? Everybody, if you so this idea of I'm going to take my most precious resource, which is our people, and I'm going to surround them with this enabling technology, which allows them their reach to be farther, their vision to be greater, that truly augments and extends what they do individually, and then coordinate that across the company. And all of a sudden, I have this entirely new and self-improving almost company.
I love that. I love that last statement that you just shared there. That really is. It's motivating because I can see from that how potentially you have the potential by doing that, if you're surrounding and supporting, and those people can kind of operate within that system that enables them to achieve more through their work, and hopefully doing positive things, how that actually could also add and enhance the culture of the business. Whereas there's a risk where people are scared of a new technology like this, and a lot of people are reluctant even to start using it, I've noticed, or even give it a go, particularly some of the older
Yeah.
generations. Just trying to coax people to have a try and have a play at a simple level. But actually, this does have the possibility, if we educate and support our people, to create more uplifting cultures, more engaging
And
cultures,
it's
exciting places
magnificent
to
to
work.
watch.
Yeah,
Like it's really because the there is a lot of just drudgery work that is better done by AI, and everybody wants to. Nobody wants to do drudgery work, right? Like that's the best part of it is that the simple administrative things that AI does better. Let it do it, right? Let your people focus on the more important intellectual um, things that make your company unique. And so the being able to tap into that kind of vibe at a company, right, is really essential to get buy-in. When we work with companies, the very first thing that we do is we call a discovery sprint,
yeah,
where we interview a whole cross section of employees across all their different functions, and we always ask similar questions. What are your biggest pain points? What are your biggest choke points? And then we ask the magic wand question, right? If you had a magic wand and could tomorrow poof into existence any capability or insight, what would it be? And it's so interesting to hear from the top leaders all the way down to the frontline workers um, what they see as their biggest pain points and what they see as their greatest wishes. And by taking that information, you can absolutely figure out how to uh, bring point solutions in to solve the problems and then give them this new capability. Um, a lot of CEOs, it's so interesting when I work with companies, I'll go and talk to them, and they're under such pressure to do something with AI, right? Like the boards and their investors are like, we've got to do something AI. And the CEOs are like, who are typically older, um, I don't understand it. I don't know what it can do. I don't know how to think about it. And I'm like, of course you do. You lead a company, and that company, no matter what industry you're in, you do stuff and you do it very well. You have a regulatory framework, you have a legal framework, you have a industry standards, you have your own ethos, and you've built processes throughout your company to effectuate all of those things. And so it's not like you're starting from scratch. The idea is that if I bring AI into a particular workflow, how does it change my risk profile? I don't have to imagine this thing completely from nothing. And so, and the other part of the company that I deal with is the lawyers. Lawyers, God bless them.
yeah,
Um, Lawyers really, really, really like to have one answer, right? So we love to be able to point to a rule, a law, a court opinion, and say, here's the answer.
yep.
Well, I'm sorry, folks, but that's just not the way that's going to be for AI for 5 to 7 more years easily. And so the technology is just too new, too big, too much. It's just that's not going to be the way that this goes. And so you've got to get comfortable in giving advice to your clients in a very fluid regulatory environment. And what that means, in especially kind of Western societies, legal systems, is this bedrock principle of reasonableness. So there's this common law principle of the reasonable person standard, which equates to a reasonable company standard. So what it says is that what would the average company do based on the information it had at the time? And so what that means is when you're using AI, what risks, reasonably foreseeable risks, are you introducing into the marketplace? What have you done to reasonably mitigate those risks? And here's the one that everybody falls down on. How can you prove it?
Yeah.
So the really cool thing about AI is that it is a technical solution, and so it can be technically controlled. And so the very best way to control AI is with AI. This concept called adversarial AI or warrior bots, if you're a geek like me. But you, when you're building a point solution, you're literally defining the psychology of that agent. It's very different than the old world of programming, where we just write thousands of lines of code and it's every instruction, it will follow that instruction and you know exactly what it's doing. That is not how these models work. And so by we could talk, we could have a whole show on this idea of constitutional AI and what it means. But basically, you're forming this psychology of this little agent, right? You give it a prime directive. Here's what you are, and then you give it a list of laws that it must live by, how it's
Yep.
supposed to behave.
Yep.
And most companies are pretty good at that. They they will build a function. If they're really good, they'll build some controls around that function. But then the key is that you want to build in sensors, for lack of a better term, that spit out metrics that prove that the agent or a multi-agentic system is staying within the parameters that you have set, whether those are legal, ethical, industry best practices, whatever, right? And that is where your reasonableness comes from.
Right.
And so if you are able to prove that this agent is acting as intended and that intention is falls within the correct regulatory rubric,
Yep.
then you can defend that to a regulator or court, to court of public opinion, which is often the most important.
Yep.
But that's the secret of really being able to control what AI does and get this transformational effect safely and
I see.
defensively.
I see. Excellent. And for people who might be listening here, they might be, have a small business or they're individual thought leaders or what sort of this a number of tools that are appearing today. And I've just been hearing this week, in the event we had, people started talking about Viber coding, and I realised there was a whole series of different products, different AI systems that you could utilize, whether you want to build websites or you build that kind of bot that you can communicate with, where you put lots of information into. What's right now, if people are trying to really educate them on it themselves on AI, and something I'm trying to do with each day, learn a bit more. Whereas people may be using something like ChatGPT or OpenAI or Claude or a multitude of other things. Where should people right now be focusing their attention and learning?
So the good news is that for all intents and purposes, all of these models are basically the same
Same.
for the
Yeah.
average human.
Yeah.
They're all incredibly powerful. They edge each other up every couple of weeks, right? Where one will
Mm.
come out with a new one and then a new capability. But for the average human and the average company, it doesn't matter. They're all very, very good.
Yeah.
Um, some are better at things than others. Like Gemini is better at math. Anthropic's Claude is a little safer because it's their whole ethos. But it almost doesn't matter, for general purpose models. And then, of course, there's tools within your industry, like the creative industry. This is, I work with many, many creatives, all the way from content creators, podcasters, but fine arts people. And at first, they're terrified. They're like, "Oh my goodness, this is gonna." They don't need a graphic designer anymore because
Mm.
you can just put in a prompt and get a graphic design, right? But that's not why people are hiring you, right? People are hiring you because of your creativity, that human spark that is essential, right? So what I tell people is the very best way to learn how to use AI is to ask it. And so sit down with ChatGPT or Claude
Mm.
or Gemini or whomever and say, hey, look, I'm a beginner. I Here's what I'm trying to learn, and put together a learning program for me. And it will take you anywhere you want to go. If you want
Fantastic.
to learn how to do graphic design, if you want to do business analysis, if you want to, right, it will teach you. It is the best teacher in the world because it is the world's largest compendium of human knowledge ever created,
Yeah.
right? So I tell people this all the time, is that just sit down and ask it. Tell them who you are, tell them what you're trying to accomplish, and then just go down the rabbit holes that you find the most interesting. The other thing I really want to leave people with, because I very often get brought in from the highest levels of the company, the board, the CEOs, things like that. But there's a lot of people who are lower down in a company who really want their company to do something with AI, right? And they don't have the authority, they don't have the right, but and they're trying to figure out how to convince somebody to do bigger things. Well, that's like herding cats, right? Like especially in like law firms or other management consulting firms that are made up of partners. All the partners are relatively equal in power. So academia is another one, right? Well, find a use case that has a very clear um, low-hanging fruit, that has a clear metrics for success, more efficiency, more money, more whatever, consistency, whatever it is, and build that. Just ask AI, how do I build this thing? And it will tell you, and build this little thing. And what happens is you end up with this really great positive use case, and it acts as a bowl of milk. So instead of herding cats, put out a bowl of milk and the cats
That's
will come to
good.
you.
Yes, like that. Well, that's a lovely way to end. Thank you very much. It's been a really fascinating conversation. I love that. I love that way. You can just simply ask AI. Just keep asking and asking. Um, if you want to find out more information about Bennett and his work, it's very helpful to have guides who could, if you've got a sizable company who can do this kind of diagnostic work with you and help you to really utilize AI. It feels like there's a potentially massive opportunities for greater creativity and cost saving and productivity and those sorts of things. So his business is clarionai.com. That's clarionai.com. On next week's show, we have Simon Bowen. Simon's is in Perth in Australia. We're going to be talking about his work. I think we're going to be talking about the Renaissance of Wisdom next week. So do check in with that. If you've got any questions or comments, drop me an email to chris@chriscooper.co.uk. I love to hear from you all, and I wish you well. And go away and think about AI and start talking to it and communicating with it and letting it teach you. I think teach you how to help yourself to achieve the objectives that you want to do, and hopefully through that you can amplify more good. We're back again with you next week. Take care.